Okay, hello everyone, and have a pleasure to show you from now on, if you're interested, games of the guys on the channel who ask me to, just show their games, interesting games, some very nice wins, masterpieces, losses where you can learn out of those things. And this time, I was asked by Steven, the guy who's one of the subs on the channel, to analyze and show to you his 5 best games. He plays all the time on chess.com. He plays against bots all the time, and it's very interesting. He's performing quite well. Of course, he sent his wins this time, and some of his best games, pretty good games, pretty good percentage according to these. Okay, he got lucky in some of these games, but I guess that actually makes these games even more interesting. Of course, you can find him on chess.com under the nickname BlackX Project, and you can just add him as a friend and ask him to play some training games. That would be very nice. Let's take a look at his games. So we're briefly going to check 5 of those games with some of my brief analysis. First game, he was white against Hikaru bot. So he went for e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, and he opted for the most aggressive approach against the French defense. You know that I covered that, and I said it's the most ambitious approach by white players against French, and his opponent, Hikaru bot, went for Steinitz defense of the French defense. He opted for the line bishop g5, quite a nice one. You know that on the channel I covered e5 and the Helden variation. I also covered on the Chessable channel like a couple of years ago, bishop g5 and Alekhine shutter defense. And in this game, he went for the bishop g5, and his opponent went for more or less very famous McCutcheon defense. So went for bishop g5, bishop b4. So let's take a look at that one. After in this game, just a moment to close this one. Just give me a sec. Some technical difficulties with this one. So what happens? After bishop g5, bishop to b4. It's the McCutcheon defense. Steven went for e5, and of course, since you want to win the knight, black is kind of forced to play h6. For example, I like bishop h4, and I won a couple of games with it. Well, white in this game went for bishop d2. They have to give up the bishop for the sake of a healthier pawn structure and jump with the knight on e4. Amongst many lines, queen g4, for example, is the main move. White opted for bishop d3, knight d2, queen d2, and c5. The point of this line, when black plays c5, is just to go with the line where they just want to play either queen a5, c4, queen a3, knight c6, a5, b5, and b4. That's a long-term plan in these positions, and it's quite typical for McCutcheon variation. Another line, apart from that, is to go, if you whatever you do, with the bishop d7, bishop c6, while at the same time knight goes on d7. For example, I remember Nepo played once this plan with the black pieces. White went for knight f3, and Engine played c4, which is the most logical move, kicking this bishop away with tempo. But at the same time, it's repositioning the light square bishop on a better diagonal. Why do I say that and how? I'll show you. After bishop f1 castles, he played a nice move g3. And after b5, went for a little bit inaccurate bishop g2. Why inaccurate? Because that bishop belongs to h3. Why does it belong to h3? I'll show you a bit later, because your plan has to be to go with castle, knight h4, and to eventually break with g4, f4, and f5 eventually. White went for bishop g2, knight e6, and Steve played a3. a3, which for the time being stops and prevents b4. After bishop d7, White went for castle, knight e7, and knight e1. This is a very strong move. I have to be honest and to say that I also like knight h4 even a little bit more. But knight e1 has a very interesting idea. It opens up the possibility for this pawn to go on f4. Pawn goes on g4, and then you just go with f5 eventually. After queen b6, which I find kind of inaccurate, because maybe black was supposed to, at this moment, do something and do some kind of break in the center with f6. Otherwise, it's going to be too late afterwards. Or maybe he just had to go with a5, trying to break fast with b4 on the queen side. After like queen b6, White went with the king h1. Measure of precaution, bishop c6, which absolutely makes no sense as far as I'm concerned, because this bishop just hits its own pawn, and still went for f4. Rook f to d8, another move that I don't like, because, for example, f6 or f5 could, at least for the time being, prevent the White's attack. But okay, after like rook f to d8, White has to come up with the right plan in order to win this game very efficiently. And he does that. He went for the bishop h3. Now you realize why did he need his bishop on h3 initially at the move, at the 13th move, to immediately support g4 and f5 breaks. After bishop d7, this just shows, you know, like the weak point of these bots, because sometimes they play these two computerish moves, and if you just have like a very clear idea what to do, they can easily go under some sort of like, under some sort of problems. Still went for g4, a5, brought his knight back into the game. Queen b7, another move that makes no sense. Black has to be faster. Knight h4, and now this is an ideal setup for White in these positions. He just wants to break with f5. So to whoever wants to learn how to play against the McCutcheon line, this game has a great plan for White, and you really can learn a lot by Steve's plan here. Going with the g4, bishop on h3, maneuvering this knight right to the h4, and supporting the f5 plan. After like rook e8, another move that makes no sense, he just goes with f5. Clearly, this game shows you that when you know your plan and when you know your, like what are you supposed to do, your opponent has lots of troubles, and basically that's the point in a game of chess. When you know your plans, you should never be afraid what should be the final result, because you simply follow your plans. Botvinnik said, even a wrong plan is better than not having a plan at all. So after e takes f5, g takes f5, now g file has just opened, so he's gonna simply switch the destination of his heavy pieces, and he does that immediately. He does queen g2, he does rook g1 threatening mate on g7, and when Hikaru bot played g6, he captured on g6, took on g6, bishop h3, and couldn't take the knight on g6 because of rook g6, queen h6. Bot went for king g7, and after knight f4, White won the game. Just once again, I gotta tell you that he sent me those 5 games that he won. Of course, that he lost many games, and these are the most these are the best ones, and I really enjoyed this one. So once again, this was a really nice McCutcheon game with a clearly great plan by White there. Now he played against Komodo, another interesting one, and let me just show you what happened in this game. So in this game he played against Komodo 22, and he just went for, he played g3, Komodo knight f6, knight f3, g6, c4. So this is a mix of Reti opening, English opening, and once he plays d4, now it just goes into some sort of the Queen's Indian with b6 and g6. It's called Romanician system. Bishop b7, bishop g2, bishop g7, knight c3, and black goes for knight e4. After knight e4, he captured an e4, exchanging these knights into the center of the board, and went for e3. e3 is not so good because he's just closed the dark square bishop, and this actually favors black in this game. After d5, which points out how weak positional is the dark square bishop and that it cannot easily get back into the game. b3 Steve played, which is fine, castles, bishop b2, and here Engine really plays well. I really don't know what is the real strength of these engines. Probably this is another bot, I just have to check it out, but here black already got like a decent advantage out of the opening. After castles, knight c6. So when you play your games, you absolutely can see the power of black against the white center, and this really looks great for black, although at some point black started to make some serious mistakes. Knight e5, bishop e5. I'm not sure how many players would take on e5 by bishop rather than knight. Of course, bishop e5, d takes e5, maybe bishop e4 was more to the point, and after this to go into this, but in a position that is blocked. Definitely a knight on c6 is doing way better than this bishop. Although Steve played d takes e5, Komodo captured and played d takes c4, followed by queen c8. Absolutely, in my opinion, a big positional mistake, because black was supposed to go into an easy middle game. How? By trading queens off, and when white captures on d1, going after the weakness. This is the point. White just has like two very weak pawns, a weak pawn on a2 and weak pawn on c4. Position is pretty blocked, and knight is doing way better than this bishop, and I believe after like rook c1, for example, rook to d8, pairing out all white's threats, and afterwards, I don't know, simply finding a way to activate with this king. I like this plan. King f8, king e8, exchange pair of rooks, bring another rook onto the file, especially because after rook to d8, white has to take, not immediately to take, play king f8, king e8, exchange pair of the rooks, bring another rook to d8, and sooner or later pawn on c4 is gonna fall because it's a weakness. So here Steve was lost, and luckily Engine played, this Komodo bot played queen c8, played f4, rook to d8, queen e2, queen e6, and now he starts to play some very nice moves. Played rook a to d1 and played g4. G4 was a very nice move because king g7 absolutely makes no sense by Engine. The thing is, you can't put the king on the diagonal where the opponent's bishop is. And Steve recognized that and immediately played a beautiful move, g4, which threatens to play f5 next, fighting against both queen on e6 and king on g7. Quite an interesting position here. So this guy played knight a5, going after the pawn on c4. He defends the pawn on c4 and plays a6. This is the problem of these bots. They somehow play so slow, and humans are way more aggressive. Sometimes they even play, most of the times, humans play weaker moves, but they have some ideas, they have some tricks up their sleeve, and that's why when you play against these humans, is in comparison to these bots, is way more interesting and way more entertaining. So that's why I want you to add him as a friend and challenge Black X Project, Black X Project called Steve, for some of these games on chess.com. So he played f5, g takes, queen c6, and king find its shelter on h3. A very nice and a little bit unique position where the king is on h3 and is untouchable. After king h8, he now finds the right way to break into the black's game. So do you realize how one move, for example, keeping the queens on the board, how one strategically bad mistake can cost black even the whole game? And all of a sudden, now Steve finds a great way to attack. He went for e6, check, by the bishop on b2, f6, and plays e4 and wants to break with e5 and fight against the king on f6. In the game was another slow b5, e5, knight c4. Who cares about this one? And here he shows like a great filling for these positions, sacrifices an exchange in order to take on f6 and finish him off. Rook d4 is the only move. Bishop d4, played f7, and now all he needs to do is just queen g4, rook g1. After queen c5, queen g4, d3, played rook to g1, and after queen e3 check, this one, king g2, queen d2, king h1, and finds this defense, threatened two kinds of mates, queen g7 and queen g8, and black just had to resign. First sacrifice the queen, and after playing h5, because for example queen d4 was threatened, queen g6 threatening queen h6, and this was queen h6 made. Great game. Turning point in this game was here when in the 15th move queen c8 was played, keeping the queens on board. That was a huge mistake. Instead of that, queens were supposed to be traded off and to play on a weak pawn on c4. One more mistake was here crucial. It was king g7. You're never supposed to put a king on the diagonal where the bishop is, and afterwards to have problems there. Then another game he sent against this Komodo, and let me just show you how did it go. It went like this. So he was black in this game. So after e4 c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5. Nothing. This is a Rossolimo system, and he opted for g6. This Komodo opted for castle, although bishop takes c6 is one of the main lines here, but that depends on preference of the player during the game. So after castles, bishop g7, rook e1. If you remember this Rossolimo system with a bishop b5, castle and rook e1 was played in a world championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Caruana. Rook e1, e5, and in that game for the world championship title, I believe that Caruana went for b4. The game eventually ended in a draw, but this is quite an interesting system. You just go for this, in which case you play bishop b5, you go knight a3, c3, and break with d4. Komodo here went for d3, which is not cup of my tea. Knight g on e7, because he now gets fully flexible knights, and now bishop c6 is no longer option. Bishop g5, another move that is not fully to my style, because if white wanted to play something, probably knight c3 and repositioning the light square bishop to a better diagonal, because bishop c6 is no longer an option. Bishop g5, d6, bishop h4. I don't understand this move by white, probably removing this bishop from some h6 or f6 ideas. Bishop d7, probably he could have gone with something like bishop g4 and pinning that knight on f3, but okay, at the moment, for example, at the moment, if white had a chance to capture on c6 and create weak pawns, he was supposed to do it. Why? Because in that case, he would have better pawn structure against the bishop pair, but you just have to know that this actually suits pretty much white because he's got a pair of knights and position is pretty blocked. Although he went for bishop h4, bishop d7, knight c3, a6, forcing the matters. I like a6 made by Black X Project. So after bishop c6, only move in order to keep the healthy pawn structure. Knight d5. For example, these weaker, and this is like just like I told you, but these weaker engines, they tend to make this kind of positional mistakes. And here, Steve took advantage of that. Okay, actually, knight d5 is not a fully a positional mistake, because after bishop d5, he actually, I forgot about this, sorry, went for bishop e7 and went into a position where the knight is a little bit better than this bishop. Okay, he went for a long castle. I'm not too big fan of this move. I would play short castle and maybe, okay, position is roughly equal or just, let's just say, unclear. I'm fine with this position. But the problem was, he went for a long castle. And here, you just have to be familiar with the typical plan of breaking black's position like this. A4, kind of okay, f5, knight e2, repositioning knight to c4, placing that knight on c4, which I kind of like. And now makes move without any sense, knight b6. Why on earth somebody would play a move like knight b6? So just like you see in all these games, we cannot see a clear, like blunder, which is good, which makes these games being with a higher quality, and I like it. But from another point of view, there are like big positional mistakes. So both these bots and weaker engines, and also Steve, they just have to keep working on more of a strategy in their games. Here, I believe I could sign this moment as a turning point of the game. Turning point of the game because this type of structure with the knight being dragged on c4 against the king should usually be broken with a rook b1 and b4. I really like this idea with a rook b1 and b4. I really think this is a great plan. And if you play rook b1, no matter, for example, Steven, this game played g5, h5, and so on. After b4, capturing rook b4, h5, that would be too slow because white would have like queen b1, queen b3, and he would triple up his pieces, plate knight a5, knight c6, and black almost would be completely lost. In the game, knight b6, and now black takes advantage of it. a5 also makes no sense, and now plays b4. He doesn't pay too much attention on this. Plays c4 to overprotect the pawn on d5, and this is why you just need to take an action in games like this. Plays rook h to f8. Maybe g3 was worth of considering, which would be pretty typical in this type of game. He went for rook h to f8, broke with f3, and now he went for h4. A relatively nice one, because he now just wants to go and reposition his rook on h8 and place his queen on the h file and to deliver checkmate. Queen b3, rook f7, overprotecting b7 against potentially dangerous lined up pieces on the b file. Knight a4, h takes, and plays bishop f6. After d6, he captured and played queen b6. Just like I previously mentioned, these weaker engines, they don't have a good feeling about the strategy most of the times, and sometimes, I'm talking about bots of course, and sometimes they just, for example, this is not a human move. I usually teach my students, if you're down materially, like in this case, what is down materially, you just have to go for complications. And in this case, this guy went for queen trade. If you ask me, makes no sense to trade the queens off if you're down a pawn. And after queen b6, rook b6, rook h8, knight c5, rook h to f7, and white was forced to sacked the piece, and afterwards he just managed to win this game relatively easy. That was a nice game, and another nice example of fighting, and when you actually have a plan, it's very, very dangerous for your opponent. So look at that. In previous game, in this game, these guys, not these guys, I mean these bots, absolutely had no plans, while Steve knew what was he supposed to do. He did it, and he managed to win his games. This is one of my favorite games because it was a really nice attack. So let's take a look at it. Steve went for knight f3, c5, c4, knight c6, and d4. Just like you see, he's wearing with his openings, playing all kinds of stuff. Started like already opening, went into the English defense, and now playing some sort of Botvinnik system. I apologize. After e4, knight f6, he plays d3. e6, knight c3, and d6. Kind of a flexible setup by black. Almost reminds me of the Scheveningen system, and he went with bishop e2, bishop b7, and played bishop g5. Nothing special in terms of some special plan for white. I just like white's development because what I like about his game, look at this. He develops all his pieces always. He puts his king into safety by making castle, and that has to be your priority if you're just a beginner. After h6, bishop h4, bishop d7, he brings with the bishop back on g3, making some sort of pressure against the d6 pawn. Commodore 24 went for knight e4, he captures and brings the knight back to b1. Why to b1? Because he's going to kill two birds after knight e4, which in my opinion was a mistake by black. He's going to remove the knight here and goes back into the game with knight d2, and he wants to play f4, doing some sort of a pawn storm with the king side on the king side. So after queen b6, b3, e5, plays and repositioning this one, and queen c5. Queen c5 makes no sense. I believe black had to react faster here and to play something else. On your question, what? Well, I like dragging my knight to c5 if possible and breaking with a5 and a4. Probably a5 and a4 in this position. But another option could be, just like playing maybe bishop e6 and maybe going with the knight on d7 and c5 like this, and then playing f5 and probably even breaking on the king side with f5. Black went for queen c5, which makes no sense. Steve played f4, a5, and went for f5. This is quite a nice system, and what I like about Steve's games is that he usually has clear plans in a pretty stable and solid positions. And for example, right here and right now, he plays f5. He knows that he wants to move this bishop somewhere, whether to f2 or h4, and to start pushing these pawns on the king side by opening king side attack. That's a nice one. He went for bishop h4, play g4, play g5, and after queen e1, repositioned the queen to g3, played h4, which in my opinion makes no sense. He just had to play king h1 and rook g1 and to immediately go for the killing attack. Played king f2, okay, played rook h1, played h5, wants to break with h6, and now when black tried his desperate attempt to open up the games, now h6. Nice one, because after h takes g7, went for bishop f6 and threatened inevitable rook h8 mate. And the game was a3, king f1, bishop f6, and rook h8 mate. Beautiful king side attack and mating attack by Steve in this game. Just once again, probably the turning point of the game was knight e4, where black was supposed to play something else. In my opinion, that could be not knight e4, but knight h5. Not knight e4, but knight h5, winning the dark square bishop, and afterwards opening up the game in a different style. After knight e4, c takes here, maybe not queen b6, maybe an interesting idea could be to do something like b5, breaking this pawn structure and preventing all these ideas with knight d2 and f4 by white. So I really enjoyed this game, and I believe crucial move in the white strategy was this f5, where he absolutely had a great attacking plan by with actually removing the dark square bishop and launching the pawn storm with bishop h4, g4, and the g5, opening the g file with inevitable mating attack by white. And finally, I just want to show you one more game there. Game against Maximum, where he won with a very, very nice one. So let me just show you this one for the end of this student games and corner. So if you also want to have like your games analyzed, just drop me an email and we're going to arrange it. So let's go with this one and let's just discuss this game. So in this game, Black X Project, Steve was white. He went for his c4, then transposed into the d4 openings, knight c3, played knight f3, and this Maximum went for this hyper solid d6, c6, g6, knight d7 system. He went for bishop e2, d5, closed the center, and here knight g and f6. That's one option. Another option was knight e7, followed by f5, but not immediately, for stage 6. So white cannot play knight g5 once black decides to break with f5. And the game was knight g and f6. And after like knight g and f6, this is like kind of King's Indian. Steve plays bishop g5, which is nice, and hides his dark square bishop here. Black didn't have to do that, but if you ask me, it's absolutely fine. I remember those games between Kramnik and Kasparov where this Petrosian system was used by white, and in Kramnik went for that. At that time, Kasparov was playing King's Indian, and he went for some knight h5, winning the dark square bishop. Even though it doesn't look that special, they just want to move the knight to d2, play knight d2, play f3, bishop f2, and break on the queen side with c5. After castles h3, knight c5, bishop d3. That's, in my opinion, big mistake. You're not supposed to give up the light square bishop in this position, and this is the moment where he immediately gave a great initiative. This typical King's Indian, e4 is hanging, so you either have to play queen c2 or ideally knight d2, over protecting here, threatening b4 to kick the knight away, so they would have to play a5, and now probably to do something, probably move even like h4, or maybe something like a bishop h2. Do you know what else I like in these positions? f3 followed by bishop f2, or even b3, a3, rook b1, and b4, which is kind of typical way of fighting against the knight on c5. He went for bishop d3, and that obviously was a mistake, because after black was supposed to take immediately bishop d7, I believe that he had to drop this bishop back to c2 and once again threaten b4, in which case black would be forced to play a5, and after this happens, he would have gone with the knight d2 and play more or less normal game, possibly with some ideas like such as b3, rook b1, a3, and b4. But I also like knight f1, knight e3, controlling the light squares in the game, because all that black wants to go in these positions is to break, just like in a classical King's Indian with f5, and you just have to take control of the light squares. After like b3, which in my opinion was pretty lame attempt by white, knight d3, queen d3, c6. I like this because in typical King's Indian, black has to play on both queen side and king side, especially when the light square bishop is off. Castles and g4. g4, I'm not a big fan of this move. I even believe it was one of those suspicious reactions here. Probably c takes d5, and if c takes d5, just move the knight somewhere, such as knight h5, and try to break afterwards with both f5 on the king side, which I like very much here by black, and maybe even b5 on the queen side with a great game. Why can you play b5? Because let's just say you play something, you don't fill the point, and you play, your opponent plays b5. Knight b5 is not good, and it doesn't work because of knight g3, f takes, and queen b6 check, which wins the knight. So the thing is, here, Kamara went for g4, h takes, bishop g4, and after knight h2 went c takes, knight takes. Now he threatens to use the deflection motif by moving this knight from f6 to weaken the bishop, bishop h5, and bishop h4. All of a sudden, with a very dominating knight on d5, beautiful bishop on h4, pin on the knight on f6, white turns out to be a lot better. Bishop g6, and after f3, overprotecting pawn on e4 and getting a good game, black went for rook e8. I am not sure why rook e8, but here Steve missed a clearly winning move immediately, and he could have gone with a knight g4, and black would immediately resign the game. Doesn't matter, he went for g4. Okay, I mean, knight g4 would just win the game on the spot, but you see, he still keeps pressuring black in this game, and now he's definitely losing the advantage because after knight d5, queen d5, engine captured on g5. Now he was down a pawn, and probably here it was time for black to reconsolidate his piece, his position, to be up a pawn and to do something with the light square bishop. Although went for f5, rook d1, bishop h7, he captured on d6, and after this played rook to d7. According to old good rule, put a rook on the 7th rank and hope for a better endgame. After b6, rook d1, bishop f5, went for rook d5, and just like you see in this pretty difficult endgame, where black had a full activity, bishop pair, and good control of the game, black played g5, knight g5, bishop f6, and blundered knight f7, followed by knight d6. The rest of the game wasn't that interesting for you, but I'm gonna show you, like briefly, knight e8, put a rook down, played bishop g3, went for the pawn, played rook to d6, played bishop h4, and you know what? Here, just like I told you, never when you play your games allow your opponent to simplify the things, because here simplifying the things is just going to help white players. So here he probably was supposed to play something like king f7, not to allow this bishop h4, because after rook e6 exchanged just everything, won the pawn on e3 and won the game. I once again have to congratulate Steve on Black X project on making these 5 great wins. Of course, he sent his games that he was most proud with. I like them a lot. I really have to say that I like tendency in his games where he somehow in a solid positions closes up the game and then chooses the way to clearly attack his opponent. Also, I just have to point out one more thing. It's gonna happen mostly against these bots on chess.com. Well, when you play against humans and real guys, it's gonna be way more difficult because humans are trickier and they all the time want to do, even in completely lost positions, want to play some interesting counter-attacking moves. If you like this one, like the video, subscribe, of course, try to send your games, and let's just see your masterpieces and your best games, whether you play against humans, bots, or whoever. Thanks so much, team, for sending these games, and congratulations once again. Bye bye, guys.